Michael. Patience can be so frustrating, but it's a crucial tool. I don't rush to be the first. I strive to get it right. I'm Lucy Hockings on BBC News Now.
Live from Washington, this is BBC News. Reports say the US is deploying stealth bombers to the Pacific island nation of Guam as President Trump weighs whether to take direct action in Iran. Pro-Palestinian student activist Mahmoud Khalil has spoken out after being released from detention here in the US.
Whether you are a citizen, an immigrant, anyone on this land, you're not illegal. That doesn't make you less of a human.
Feeling the heat, temperatures climb in Europe and America as the UK experiences the hottest day of the year so far. Hello, I'm Regina Vaidyanathan and welcome to This Hour. As President Trump weighs whether to join Israel's military offensive on Iran, media reports here say America's moving stealth bombers to the Pacific Island territory of Guam. The enormous planes are the only ones capable of delivering the so-called bunker buster bombs, which could destroy Iran's underground nuclear facilities. A B-2 can carry two such weapons known as massive ordnance penetrators, which weigh some 30,000 pounds. The B-2s reportedly departed Whiteman Air Force Base in the state of Missouri en route to the Pacific Island nation, where there's a US military base. Guam is the largest and southernmost island in the Mariana Islands chain, situated in the North Pacific Ocean. Well, there's currently no indication the US is planning to deploy the bombers to Iran, but President Trump has returned to Washington and the White House in the last few hours, where he is now said to be meeting with his national security team. We'll bring you the very latest on that as we get it. Meanwhile, Israel has launched fresh strikes on Iran on Saturday, claiming to have targeted dozens of military sites, killing 3 more senior Iranian commanders, including one man it claims was key in planning the October 7th attacks. Footage shared on social media and verified by the BBC shows explosions in the western Iranian town of Avaz. The Israeli military says it was conducting operations on military infrastructure in the area. The bombing campaign continues as Iran's foreign minister said his country cannot negotiate with America while it's being attacked by Israel. He was speaking in Istanbul at a gathering of his counterparts from dozens of Muslim-majority nations. He warned that US involvement in the conflict would be very, very dangerous. Meanwhile, in the past hour, we've received reports that Iran's been targeting Israel with a new wave of drone attacks. Iranian state TV reports that the drones are headed towards strategic targets throughout the regime's territory. Earlier, Israel struck Iran's nuclear facility near Isfahan, pressing ahead with its aerial assault. So far, Israel struck both Natanz and Isfahan, but the Fordo nuclear facility, which is believed to be even deeper underground than the Channel Tunnel, which of course connects the UK and France, has remained out of reach of Israel's weaponry.
But in order for us to come back to diplomacy, the aggression should be stopped. It is obvious I cannot go to negotiation with the United States when our people are under bombardments, under the support of the United States.
Our Middle East correspondent Hugo Beshega is in Jerusalem. He told me more about the American bombers which are being deployed. So, Hugo, we're hearing that US military assets are being moved closer to the region. Just tell us more about that.
Yeah, Regina, so we've seen these reports in US media saying that America is now moving B-2 bombers to the Pacific island of Guam. And this is obviously the type of aircraft that can carry the so-called bunker buster bombs that could be used to strike the key nuclear facility of Fordo, which is a facility that is buried deep underground inside a mountain. And this is a kind of bomb that the Israelis don't don't have, but the Americans do. So obviously this happens as President Trump is considering his options. He, has, according to reports, approved plans for direct American involvement in this conflict, but he hasn't taken the decision to go ahead with those plans. Now, obviously, this doesn't indicate, doesn't suggest that an attack is imminent, but obviously, any kind of direct American involvement would be a significant escalation here, because Iran and its proxies in the region have vowed to respond to any kind of American involvement by striking, targeting American interests in the region. So we could be seeing escalation instead of de-escalation here.
And Hugo, more than a week into this, what signs are there of any diplomatic breakthroughs?
So we know there is a lot of diplomatic activity happening behind the scenes, but it's very difficult to see how any kind of deal can be reached at the moment. The Iranians are saying they're not going to negotiate under attack. The Israelis have been celebrating what they see as a very successful operation so far, so they have no reason to stop these attacks right now. And also there's no significant pressure on Israel to stop these attacks. I think also what is very important here is that Iran, at least in public, has been repeating its position that it will not give up its ability to enrich uranium. It says it has the right to do so, and this has become a red line in this issue, because this is part of President Trump's demand of unconditional surrender, and the Iranians are saying they're not going to do it. So there have been these diplomatic efforts, but no signs of breakthrough.
That's Hugo Bashega there. Well, let's get more on all of that by speaking to Ray Takei, a senior fellow for Middle East Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome to BBC News, Ray. You worked in the State Department as a senior advisor on Iran under the Obama administration, of course, an administration that brokered that famous nuclear deal with Iran. What do you think can be done to de-escalate the situation diplomatically?
Well, it's going to be very challenging, because all the three leaders involved, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and increasingly President Donald Trump, are blowing the bridges behind them. One of the things that's possible at this point, you can negotiate some kind of a pause where the Iranians pause enrichment, the Israelis pause their military attacks, while some kind of a negotiations take place and some sort of diplomatic engagement gets off the ground. That is possible, but at this point it seems far-fetched. The Israelis, as the report mentioned, feel very euphoric about their successes. The Iranians are entrenched in their positions, and the United States seem to be itching to get close to intervention in this conflict.
Indeed. I mean, I'm just reading what we heard earlier from the president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, who said his country will never agree to give up all nuclear activities, and yet that seems to be the red line from President Trump in some way.
Well, proscribing domestic enrichment in Iran is the position of the United States today. It was a position of the United States going into the negotiations with Iran during the Trump administration with Representative Witkoff. But again, you can negotiate a pause where everybody pauses activities. The fact of the matter is, at this point, I'm not quite sure if Iran is capable of enriching uranium. The Fordo plan may be struck soon, and therefore much of its enrichment capability, at least the ones we know of, will be disabled, at least for the period of time. So they don't have to give up the right in principle, but they can pause it as a practice while they come to some sort of framework agreement. But that requires cooler heads, and it requires time. The American position at this point is a compressed timeline of 2 weeks, and its demands are maximalist, essentially calling on Iran to capitulate. That's going to be tough to do.
You've worked at this close up. How do the Iranians negotiate on this stuff?
In a very problematic and protracted and difficult way. They can be very difficult negotiators. They tend to be very technical in terms of their approach, and they tend to elaborate every detail. But, these are arms control agreements, and negotiations are inherently difficult, and they tend to be very technical. But they're quite a cantankerous interlocutor. That's what I would say.
Let me ask you about the reports that we're getting that these B-2 bombers are being moved to Guam. How significant do you see that?
Well, it is significant as a symbolic gesture at the very least. B-2 bomber, by the way, can probably reach its targets from the United States. But its ostentatious deployment in Guam is another indication to Iran that the United States is serious about possibly intervening in this conflict, and therefore it would behoove the Iranian officials to come to terms with the Americans with alacrity. So there's some kind of a showmanship taking place here, but it is essentially a symbolic gesture. But the problem with deploying the B-2s in this manner, in such a public display, it's hard to walk that back.
Right. So as the national security meeting continues to take place at the White House, do you think, I mean, it's difficult to guess, it's hard to guess anything with the current administration, but do you think there is a stronger possibility that this could mean that the US does join Israel in its offensive?
Unless there is some sort of a diplomatic meeting, it's very difficult to see the United States getting involved in this war without at least some kind of a meeting between Iranian and American representatives. But you know, we're in a very kind of a crisis situation where everything's moving fast, so anything's possible. But it behooves the American and Iranian representatives to at least meet to discuss this issue. I do believe that, at least indirectly, Foreign Minister Araghchi and President Trump's emissary, Steve Witkoff, have been in touch and have exchanged messages. Whether they're talking past each other or not, I don't know. But there's still a 2-week deadline that the president has issued, and perhaps some kind of a diplomatic activity can take place during that time.
Okay, Ray Takei, as someone who has worked on this close up, it's really great to have your insights on the story. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
A British man's been arrested near an RAF base in Cyprus on suspicion of spying and terrorism offences. Local media is reporting that the man is of Azerbaijani descent and has links to Iran's Revolutionary Guards. The Foreign Office says it's in contact with the authorities in Cyprus regarding the arrest of a British man. Israel says an Iranian attack on Israelis in Cyprus has been foiled. Well, our correspondent Joe Winwood has more.
So Cyprus, I'm sure people can think of the geography, Cyprus is the closest island, the closest part of Europe to Israel. And so I think what's been happening is a lot of people, because they can't fly out, that you get in via the sea route. And so one imagines there are going to be quite a lot of Israeli citizens going both directions, because that's the only way to get in and out of the country. And presumably that is why there is this kind of concern, or the reports of attacks on Israeli citizens there.
That's Joe Winwood there. Pro-Palestinian student activist Mahmoud Khalil, who spent 3 months in prison in Louisiana for his involvement in Gaza war protests, has returned home after being released from detention on Friday. Mr. Khalil was a prominent voice in protests at Columbia University against Israel's conduct in Gaza. He was arrested by immigration agents in March. The Trump administration invoked a rarely used immigration law to claim his views threatened US foreign policy. On Friday, a federal judge ruled that the Syrian-born Palestinian should be freed. Mr. Khalil's a legal US resident and hasn't been charged with any crime. Well, Mr. Khalil spoke to journalists after he arrived in New Jersey. Our North America correspondent Nomia Iqbal was there.
Mahmoud Khalil arrived at the airport pumping his fist. He was accompanied by his wife, and they were both pushing a pram with their newborn son, a son who was born whilst he was in detention. Mahmoud Khalil was one of the more high-profile voices during those anti-war protests that we saw spread across US campuses last year. He was detained back in March, and when he arrived at the airport, he was greeted by a group of friends who cheered him. I asked him, given that the Trump administration wanted to keep him detained, what was his message for President Trump?
Just the fact that I am here, it's a message. The fact that all these attempts to suppress pro-Palestine voices have failed now. So this is the message. My existence is a message. The Palestinian existence is a message to this administration.
Now, Mahmoud Khalil was never charged with a crime. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, used a rare immigration law to argue that his presence, his advocacy for Palestinians was a threat to national security. Mr. Khalil and his team say that's not true. and that it was a violation of his right to free speech. There is a separate case going through the courts for Mr. Khalil regarding his immigration status. The Trump administration is appealing his release. They want to deport him. But for now, his lawyers say that he's happy to be reunited with his wife and his son.
In a surprise move, Belarus has released 14 political prisoners, including Sergei Tikhanovskaya, the husband of the exiled opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Well, they shared this video of their emotional reunion. Her husband was a popular blogger who was jailed in 2020 after he announced plans to run for president. He was sentenced to 18 years. Well, Ms. Tikhanovskaya ran in his place and is widely believed to have won the election, but she fled with their children. Well, this surprise release comes as US Special Envoy Keith Kellogg was in Minsk over the weekend, meeting President Alexander Lukashenko, a critic of the Tikhanovskayas. Well, the freed prisoners are now in Lithuania, but more than 1,000 political detainees remain in Belarus. Franak Vierkork is a friend of the family and chief of staff for the family when she took over from her husband Sergei. He shared to the BBC his feelings on what he said was a special day.
Oh, it was so nice to see them together. These are two powerful persons who inspired the protests of 2020. You know, Sergei, when he spoke first to Svetlana, he said, "Svetlana, I forgot to speak. I forgot to talk because for 5 years I was talking only to the walls of the prison cell." But in the end, you know, he joked, you know, addressing to American State Department people, he said, "Oh, Americans, you made my day today." And it was very funny how this person who maybe looked very differently from Sergei Tikhanovsky 5 years ago, but inside he's the same, you know, with humor, with energy, with charisma. And I think he will give a lot of inspiration to Belarusian movement, both inside the country and in exile. We see today, you know, thousands of messages, requests coming to the office of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya from inside of Belarus. They want to join the movement, they want to do things. So this release will help to revive our movement, our work, and the changes in the country, and also to raise the topic of political prisoners. So we hope it will not be the last release. We have to fight for the release of all 1,150 people. And he said today that, you know, Svetlana, I didn't believe I will come out alive. And because the health was deteriorating, he was basically killed by the regime. He was tortured without contacts, without medical care. But he also is willing to get back to the political life. And I'm sure he will join the democratic forces. He will be a powerful voice on the international arena. We will work continuously with the European Union, who is our major ally, but also United Kingdom and the United States to release all political prisoners, because it's the first step to bring changes in Belarus.
We have been watching, and an accident involving a hot air balloon in Brazil has killed at least 8 people. The balloon caught fire and plunged to the ground in the southern state of Santa Catarina. The local fire department said 13 people survived, including the pilot. An investigation's underway. Restaurant chains in Japan specialising in rice dishes are introducing more noodles to their menus as they struggle to keep up with the sky-high cost of rice, which has doubled in price in the past year. The cost has continued to rise despite the release of more than 600,000 tonnes of stockpiled rice from government reserves. The Italian fashion designer Giorgio Armani will miss his 2 shows at Milan's Fashion Week for the first time in more than 50 years. The company said the 91-year-old's recovering at home after he was admitted to hospital. They added that Mr. Armani will follow every phase of the shows closely as usual. Millions of people across the US and UK face dangerously high temperatures going into the first official weekend of summer. A heat dome formed by warm air trapped in the Earth's atmosphere is stretching across much of the US. The country's National Weather Service has issued heat advisories and extreme heat warnings across the central and eastern parts of the country, including for major cities like Chicago, Washington and New York City. The agency's warning that triple-digit temperatures and oppressive humidity could be common through the next week, impacting at least 300 million people possibly. Well, Frank Pereira is the lead forecaster at the Weather Prevention Centre. I spoke to him earlier.
And this is the first significant heat wave of the season. And what makes this one especially significant is the early onset of it. We're expecting temperatures that we don't typically see until later in the summer, July, August, but we're seeing them now in late June across a good portion of the Midwest into the eastern U.S.
And what do you think is the cause of this?
Well, the specific cause for this is, as you mentioned, a heat dome. It's an area of high pressure in the upper levels of the atmosphere that kind of serves as a lid, and it traps the heat in and doesn't allow it to escape. And it also doesn't allow for much relief at night, keeping those temperatures above average, especially in urbanized areas.
So what is your advice to people, some hundreds of millions who are going to be impacted by this?
So yeah, this level of heat can be dangerous to anyone without effective cooling or adequate hydration. So we always advise people that are outside to wear light-colored, loose-fitting clothing, take breaks as often as you can, stay hydrated, check on those that are more vulnerable to the heat, and that would include the elderly, the very young. Always never leave anyone unattended in a locked car. We always advise people to look before they lock, and this would include pets as well. Temperatures can quickly soar inside of a locked car without air conditioning. Again, these are the things we advise.
We talk about a heat dome, as we've discussed. How common are these heat domes? Could we expect more of them as the summer continues?
Yeah, it's too early to say how many more of these we'll see, but yes, they are typical of this time of year, especially as we get later in the summer. We tend to see these a lot, especially in the western U.S. They typically build over the southwestern U.S., the desert areas, but they are not unheard of in the eastern U.S. as well, such as this one. But again, this one is a pretty early onset for this one.
Let's turn to record temperatures in the UK, which recorded a temperature of 33.2 degrees Celsius. That was in Surrey, in the south of England, I should say, making it the hottest day of the year. Well, temperatures are expected to dip even further, but an amber heat health alert was issued by the UK's Health Security Agency. That's going to remain in place until Monday. Research suggests that nearly 600 people could die over the next 4 days due to extreme heat in England as well as Wales. Olivia Richwald has more.
When the longest day of the year coincides with the hottest day of the year, the result is thousands of people up early to see in the summer solstice at Stonehenge. The crowd this morning broke new records.
It's beautiful. Sunrise is beautiful. It's picture perfect.
You stand in front of these stones and you feel that weight of history. Thousands of years people have been gathering. Absolutely. And it's incredibly special.
A sticky night for many gave way to sunny skies, and with it an amber warning for heat. A record temperature of 33.2 degrees Celsius was recorded in Surrey. It was hot too in central London. These swimmers in Hampstead Heath were taking advantage of the cool water as the intense heat kicked in. And at Lincoln Zoo, keepers put sun cream on some of the animals, including this tapir. And the monkeys enjoyed frozen treats. In the small village of Buckton, in the heart of the Yorkshire Dales, around 100 runners took part in a fell race up an incredibly steep hill.
Imagine running up a hill that steep in a heat wave. Thankfully, the Upper Wharfdale Fell Rescue Team are here, counting every competitor out and every competitor back in. And they're up there with water and rehydration sachets if they're needed.
Did it put you off, the fact that we're in a heat wave doing a fell race?
No, a few friends texted this morning saying, are you sure it's a wise choice? And I hope you stay safe. But no, it was absolutely fine.
How did you find the run?
For that 6.5, not bad, yeah. Yeah, very warm, but enjoyable.
The village gala here is a tradition broken only by COVID and foot and mouth. Last year it was a washout with heavy rain. This year, organisers hope to raise thousands of pounds for the local community. Tonight, a yellow storm warning is in place for Northern England, North Wales and South Scotland, with flash flooding and intense lightning possible until 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. Back in North Yorkshire, the Buckton Gala ends with something else that should also come with a yellow warning. Olivia Richwald, BBC News, in the Yorkshire Dales.
The Netherlands have officially handed back the famous Benin bronzes to Nigeria. 119 precious ancient sculptures which were stolen from the former kingdom of Benin more than 120 years ago during colonial times. Well, the Benin bronzes are metal and ivory sculptures. They date back to the 16th and 18th century, and there's long been a campaign for them to be returned. Well, Nigeria celebrated their homecoming with a ceremony held at the National Museum in Lagos. There you can see what some of those famous Benin bronzes look like. Incredible, given that they are so old. Well, just a reminder of our top story this hour. And right now we understand that President Trump is meeting with his national security team at the White House. This is the live shot of the White House as that meeting continues on. Now, this all comes as the president is weighing whether or not to join Israel's military offensive on Iran. And the significant development in the last few hours here in the United States is that media reports here say that America is moving stealth bombers, B-2s, to the Pacific Island territory of Guam. Now, these are enormous planes, the only ones capable of delivering the so-called bunker buster bombs, which could destroy Iran's underground nuclear facilities. A B-2 can carry 2 weapons known as massive ordnance penetrators, which weigh 30,000 pounds. And so they are seen as key to any strategy if the US was to join Israel in its offensive on Iran to try and take out its nuclear capabilities. Well, we do have more on that on the BBC News website. We are continuing to run a live page, as you can see there, with all of the updates, including the latest on the ground from Iran and Israel. I'm Eugenie Vaidyanathan. I'll be back after a short break. Do stay with us on BBC News.
Now on BBC News, a global, topical, weekly show that lifts the hood on the entertainment and news business, exploring the companies and personalities who command our attention and how our perception of the world is shaped by them. The Media Show.
Hello, I'm Katie Razzle.
And I'm Ros Atkins. This week on The Media Show, we'll look at how the international media has covered the conflict between Israel and Iran.
And as Netflix releases a new documentary about the Grenfell Tower fire in London, we speak to its director.
We'll also talk about the social media platform Reddit. It's turning 20, and we're going to learn how its communities moderate themselves and how AI may change that. That's all coming up on The Media Show. The conflict between Israel and Iran has been dominating the news this week, and we've been looking at the challenges for journalists who are covering the story.
On Wednesday, we spoke to Shana Oppenheimer from BBC Monitoring in Tel Aviv and to Shashank Joshi, defence editor at The Economist.
There are very, very few, if any, publications that have permanent staff based in Iran. And that's partly a function of the way the Iranian regime has conducted itself. It has arrested many, many dual nationals over the years, accusing them of espionage, and it has not been a hospitable place to do journalism. And therefore, the result is that most organizations covering this story are based either in Israel or in other parts of the Middle East, but not in Iran. And that creates a certain, I think, detachment from what's happening. But the other thing that strikes me that's very interesting is we're dealing with a sort of simultaneous transparency and opacity. And the transparency is the fact that I am able to acquire satellite photographs of nuclear sites in Iran of a sort that would have blown the socks off a CIA chief in the 1950s within hours. But actually, at the same time, I am grappling with very, very sensitive claims about intelligence that are much more challenging to vet, scrutinize, probe. And I think that this is a problem we are finding in many conflicts around the world.
And how do you go about that challenge that you described in the last part of your answer, that you're getting information about what's happening in Iran often from your sources, but then the work of standing that information up is particularly difficult?
Well, I think part of the answer is using social media and other channels to try to get first-hand accounts of what's happening on the ground. And that can serve us very well in some circumstances. In cities where there are lots of people with mobile phones capturing footage, obviously it does not serve us very well when it comes to the question of whether a particular building struck in Tehran was a centrifuge production facility for uranium. We can't answer that just by studying the wreckage from the outside. And so the answer, as always with good journalism, as you both know very well, is triangulation. You talk to as many people as you can from a range of different backgrounds and nationalities, and you try to piece together different parts of the puzzle, always accepting that you don't know everything, and I think conveying some of those caveats to your readers or your viewers or listeners.
Would you also try and develop sources within Iran, or would doing that put them at risk to a degree that you wouldn't be comfortable with?
No, we'd absolutely develop sources within Iran. Some of my colleagues have excellent sources within Iran. And Iran is, it is a repressive state. But that doesn't mean people can't talk to you using encrypted apps, using means of safe and secure communications that would not have been available to people 15 or 20 years ago in the same way. And that allows us to get those direct views of people. I think having said that, though, we are aware that when you talk to some people in Iran, they will be operating under conditions of surveillance, of self-censorship, and also they may have to tailor what they say and what they tell you for fear of repercussions. And you have to factor that in. I will say here, of course, on the Israeli side, Israel has wartime censorship, and it has a military censor that operates even in peacetime. So, for instance, Israel has asked people not to report on where missiles have struck buildings in case that it helps Iranian targeting. And there are certain subjects that Israeli journalists cannot report on unless they attribute it to the foreign press. So that sense of wartime restraint is absolutely operative in Israel to some degree as well.
And Shoshank, one aspect of this story which you will be able to cover is the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's direct communication with Iranians, often happening via media outlets, where he is saying this is an opportunity for you to change who controls and runs your country. What's your observation of how he's used the media to deliver that message?
Well, this is interesting because the Israel Defense Forces have just as they have an Arabic language spokesman, they have a Persian language spokesman who delivers messages in Farsi. And some of those are operational messages, like the one we saw recently to clear large areas of Tehran. But some of those are very political messages. And similarly, from the Prime Minister, he has used often television channels that are popular in the Iranian diaspora, like Iran International, as he did the other day, to deliver a message effectively of his ambition of regime change in Iran. I think this is particularly effective when you have a very connected population. But Iran, of course, is also trying to disrupt and limit the internet domestically because it is aware that that also is a way of keeping itself safe sometimes.
Very useful. Shoshank, thank you very much for joining us on the Media Show. That's Shoshank Joshi, who's the defence editor of The Economist.
And now we're also joined by Shana Oppenheimer from BBC Monitoring, who is in Tel Aviv. How did you and other outlets in the region hear about this operation first? And also where you are in Tel Aviv, how has the domestic media been covering the story, the impact of the strikes in Israel?
I'll start personally. I was sleeping on last Thursday night. I was awoken around 3 in the morning by missile sirens. At this point in the war, you kind of assume they're all being launched from Yemen, so there's a tendency not to take them too seriously. I personally didn't bother to make it to a bomb shelter. I just kind of stood in my hallway. And as the siren ended, it was a bit shorter than usual. I got an alert to my phone, which I had never gotten before, kind of this warning sound saying to be near a protected area. It was quite confusing. And then very quickly through local media and kind of my own journalist channels, we understood that the Israeli military had struck sites in Iran, and this is kind of when all of it started. There was a bit of shock and surprise, even though there was a lot of reporting leading up to this that indicated this could happen.
And how quickly did you start reporting it, and you and others? And of course, I'm very interested in how the domestic media is covering it.
Pretty soon I kind of turned on the channel, started looking at things, writing my colleagues about it, and kind of I cover mostly Israeli media and how it's kind of messaging and portraying events to the public. And very, very quickly, you see this kind of wartime mode kick into gear with the Israeli media putting up slogans of "Together we will win," is Israel attacking Iran, and very much cheerleading what they see as significant military achievements in Iran, while not mentioning whatsoever the civilian impact of those strikes.
And do you see different media coverage across, depending on the political spectrum, or is it all very one note?
I would say what's quite striking about this, though, is a general trend in the Israeli media and the public is on the eve of this attack. There was a lot of criticism of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the way he was handling the war in Gaza, and the view that it's dragging on kind of for his own political survival. And you see that criticism really heavily in the mainstream media, the left-wing media, not so much the right-wing media. The second Israel kind of goes and decides to launch an attack on Iran, and Netanyahu, I will say, has a tendency to pursue kind of favorable public policy. You see kind of across the board this kind of excitement and cheerleading and kind of view that this was a good thing. And for Netanyahu, we can talk a lot about his calculations, but this was a fantastic distraction from all of the criticism that he has kind of been receiving since October 7th, before October 7th, just on the eve of this, he himself kind of being able to escape a pretty significant threat to his own ruling coalition.
And there was even a presenter, wasn't there, comparing him to Churchill and other big figures?
Yeah, we've seen that a lot in right-wing media. One broadcaster said that by striking Iran, Netanyahu kind of proved himself to do much more for the world than Winston Churchill or MLK ever did. Though that kind of sentiment is not necessarily shocking from something like Channel 14, which is kind of likened to the Israeli Fox News. I think what's more striking is when you see it in mainstream media, when the day before there was so much criticism of the way he handles his kind of military policy.
That was Shana Oppenheimer and Shoshank Joshi speaking to us on Wednesday.
Now, this week marked 8 years since the Grenfell Tower fire in London. It was a high-rise residential building and 72 people lost their lives, including 18 children. A public inquiry found that their deaths were avoidable.
Now, Netflix has released a new documentary that investigates what happened. It's called Grenfell Uncovered, and a key focus is who knew what and when about the flammable cladding that had been put around the tower.
This is described as sticking a petrol tanker to the outside of a building. This was this huge corporate scandal. There's internal emails that say, oops, we are not clean.
Sadly, companies were able to find a way around the regulations.
Any minister who wants to introduce a regulation has to scrap one.
We raised concerns with the council. We were labelled scroungers. We didn't deserve anything, so just shut up.
There are thousands of buildings that still have the combustible cladding.
Feel free to ask me as many questions as you like, but use your time wisely. Right.
We were joined by the director of Grenfell Uncovered, Olaide Sadiq.
Obviously, it took some time, and I think it was about making it a safe space for people to want to tell us their story. There are some people who have spoken in this documentary at length, probably for the first time to this degree. Obviously, they've done maybe smaller news pieces and stuff like that. And there are people who are taking part in, not necessarily being survivors, but are taking part for the first time in a Grenfell documentary. So it was about buying into what we were saying we wanted to do and believing us. So it was about building trust and saying that we want to make this different. We want to make this purposeful. We want to make this bold. And we want people to understand what happened and how it happened. And I think, you know, the trust was there, the trust was built, and it allowed people to come to us and tell their stories. And actually, I think they welcomed the opportunity to do so, because a lot of people want to keep speaking, but they haven't had resolve, they haven't had a conclusion. So whilst they haven't had that, the Grenfell story is still very real for them.
Now, the Grenfell report, the inquiry report, identified a series of failures by both government and the private sector, rendering the tower a death trap, and the cladding was pinpointed as the principal factor for the rapid spread of the fire. And drilling down into who knew what about the cladding and when is, as we were saying, a key aspect of your documentary. What new evidence did you uncover, and how did you get it?
So we obviously combed through the inquiry in fine detail. So there are a lot of things from the inquiry that people may not have seen before that we've brought to light. And we also went through our own endeavours to look into paperwork and different actions that took place in America to understand that one of the companies involved who made the cladding may have known about the dangers of the product, years before the fire. And that's what we wanted to find out, and I think that's what we did find out, and that's what we brought to the surface in a way that we feel is new and hasn't been done before.
And you took legal action, I think, in order to get some internal emails released between staff at this company, the cladding manufacturer in the US, Arconic. What did they reveal? Yeah. How did you do that, and what did they reveal?
I mean, the process was about submitting a case to do it, and that had to go through its own process. And that took some time. So that was the how. It wasn't, we didn't kind of go to war with them, but we put our case and we had to wait for an answer. And what it revealed was that senior executives at Arconic were aware of the dangers of that particular product before and during the sale of Grenfell, and even just after the sale. And at one point did they, step in and maybe pull it from the sale or advise that it wasn't suitable, even though there was documents to show that the PE version of that product wasn't suitable for high-rise buildings. And that is the product that ended up on the Grenfell Tower, unfortunately.
So yes, these were the cassette-shaped cladding elements that were on that fire that went up so quickly up the side of that building once the fire started. Is what you found significantly different to the criticism of Arconic by the inquiry chairman, Sir Martin Moore-Bick? And because he said the company had deliberately and dishonestly concealed test data going back to 2005 that showed its cladding burnt in an extremely dangerous way and misled the market with safety statements it knew to be false, he said.
Yeah, I'd say we were aligned with what he says, and I think we've tried to go further in trying to highlight that, because not everyone probably would have listened to Sir Martin Moore-Bick's delivery or read the inquiry, followed the inquiry. We wanted to make not just about Arconic, but everyone involved in the Grenfell story wanted to make that information digestible to a lot of audiences who may not know about Grenfell at all or know who's involved.
And what response have you had from Arconic?
Their response is in the film, and their response was brief, and their response was that they didn't mislead, and they stand by their product being safe to use in building construction.
And we did, of course, ask for a statement from the company. We didn't get a response, but at the Grenfell Inquiry final report last year, they said that their subsidiary Arconic Architectural Products, SAS, supplied sheets of aluminium composite material that were used to manufacture the rain screen for the Grenfell Tower refurbishment. They add this product was safe to use as a building material and legal to sell in the UK, as well as the more than 30 other countries in which AAP customers purchased the product. We reject any claim that AAP sold an unsafe product.
Hello, Elodie. It's Ros here, listening to you talking with Katie. As I'm listening to you, I'm wondering what kind of response you've had from the community around Grenfell Tower and whether you were nervous about showing the community the film.
I wouldn't say I was nervous. The response actually has been predominantly positive. I think obviously there's so much to the Grenfell story, and there's only so much you can include. We can't tell every story, and we know we're not the first documentary, and we're probably unlikely to be the last. But I would say the response has been really positive. It's been very emotional. It's a very, very emotional space, given that it's 8 years on very recently. The silent walk I was out on Saturday was very somber. I think with the announcement of the tower coming down, there's a very different feel in the community. So I think people welcomed seeing it, and I think they appreciated the opportunity to see it before it was launched on the platform. And that feedback was very raw, very emotional, but it was very emotionally charged as well. And I think it galvanized a lot of people who feel like this could help push the dial somewhat in their push for change and justice.
And you use the word galvanize. Is it your hope that more broadly, the many people who watch this documentary on Netflix will be galvanized? Are you hoping for an impact such as in a very different way we saw from programs like Adolescence or Mr. Bates versus the Post Office? I
mean, I think if it had a sliver of the same, that would be amazing. Both those programs did such an amazing job of igniting conversations and getting people talking and pushing for change. And I think that's what the Grenfell community and the bereaved and survivors want. They want change, they want accountability, they want justice. And I think the way we've packaged this film, I hope that would be something that can kickstart those conversations. I think if it's having real conversations with decision makers in this country, I think that would be massive for us and massive for all those directly affected by the fire, because it is a story that doesn't just concern the victims and the bereaved. I think it concerns all of us. We all live in this country, and it happened in this country, and it may well could happen again if change isn't made. So I think it would be amazing if the documentary does have a wider impact on the cladding still on buildings, on the way we govern this country, the way people in social housing are treated. There's a number of things that we cover that we'd like to conversations to be started from, for sure.
Now, next on the media show, we're going to talk about the social media platform Reddit. If you haven't used the site, well, it's built around over 100,000 interest-based communities, and they focus on everything from politics to gardening to cute animals.
It has more than 100 million daily active users globally. We spoke to Laura Nessler, Reddit's global head of community.
Reddit is a community of communities. It's a place where people, anyone, you can come together around the things that you care about the most. So you can go and learn about something, but also you can go in and get really deep on a niche particular interest and find people there that are just as passionate about those things as you are. So for
how
example,
do you get into it? I mean, just describe for people, what do you actually do? What is this, when you go on a subreddit or a thread, what is it?
Sure. So a subreddit is just a community. Like you mentioned, there's over 100,000. They're all created and run by community members themselves. So you could search for a new skincare regime or how to rebuild an engine, and you'll find a community for that on Reddit. You can immediately join the conversation by posting or commenting or voting and just getting involved.
Roz and I are news people, first and foremost, I suppose. And there's a new report by the Reuters Institute released yesterday, which suggests that social media is now the main source of news in the US. Do users go to Reddit for news, I wonder?
Well, certainly what's happening in the news is happening on Reddit. It really is a reflection of whatever is happening in the world. But the nuance here is that people go to Reddit for discussion about the news. So you'll see a breaking headline posted, and then hundreds of people on Reddit unpacking it in the comments. They want to recount the play-by-play. They want to assess the impact of whatever event just broke. So it's not just about what happened. It's really about the conversation.
And you've mentioned several times that the moderators and the community are at the heart of this, and that each different section may have different rules. So help us understand how the moderation works. How do the rules get enforced?
Our unique moderation model is really what keeps Reddit real. It's what creates spaces for people to feel vulnerable and be authentic. There are 3 layers of moderation. First, Reddit, the platform, governs the infrastructure. So things like policies, safety standards, we enforce a set of rules that applies to everybody. But moderators are the second layer. Every community has at least one moderator, and these are community members, not Reddit employees. And what they do is they create an additional set of rules that sit on top of our platform policies that are tailored to the community's unique needs and goals. So for example, UK Personal Finance, they have an additional set of rules that includes no specific investment recommendation. My favorite example is a community called Cats Standing Up.
Right.
You may be surprised to find out that
Sounds
Reddit,
niche.
Yeah, Reddit corporate, we do not have any site-wide rules dictating whether cats can be sitting or standing. That may be a surprise, but you better believe that in that community, your post will be removed by the moderators if it's not a cat and that cat is not standing up.
Well, I guess
we also have a third layer of moderation, which is our users. So this is really important because users' participation is what makes Reddit really authentic. It's how content is displayed within the communities. And what it does is it builds the community's culture because it creates a single shared view of all of the content with the community posts. But I think what's important to remember is that the power on Reddit is distributed by design, right? It is this tension and checks and balances with communities at the center of gravity that all exist to make sure the communities thrive.
But if the communities are the center of gravity and you have this model which really can only thrive with those communities being very active, I'm listening thinking, well, I can understand why people might want to join these communities, but I'm also thinking this sounds like a lot of work for someone to maintain these communities. Does Reddit pay any of them?
We do not pay our moderators. No, moderators, I think what's important to remember is that moderators are here for their communities, right? Not for Reddit. They don't have a specific set of tasks that Reddit is giving them. So our role at Reddit is really to empower our moderators, ensure that they have the tools and the programs to be successful at whatever the goal is for their individual community. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've been investing in on Reddit side.
And I must ask you about AI. Of course, any conversation around any tech product has to feature that. You place a huge emphasis as a company, and you've also done this during the interview on the importance of community and of the individual moderators who make Reddit so special. But surely there is a risk here that as Reddit embraces AI in a range of ways, you won't be such a human company, that actually the technology will become more dominant in shaping the experience.
If left unchecked, yes. But I believe that it's as much of a challenge as it is an opportunity. So looking ahead, of course, we're really focused on preserving the humanness of Reddit and the internet in general. People are exhausted by inauthentic information online. Everything is polished, everything is sponsored, everything is AI generated, and that's just not Reddit, right? Reddit is real. So what we're doing to make sure that Reddit stays human is exploring ways to confirm that users are real people without needing their personal information. So we need to know you're a human, but we don't need to know your name.
So that helps in terms of the users, but in terms of how the moderation and the site works, if you are, for example, and I think this is correct, Reddit is allowing AI models to train on Reddit content. Once the AI has learned how the Reddit content works, surely it will be in a position to to moderate, to shape the content that is posted or not posted on Reddit, and thus it will do quite a few people who love the platform out of a role.
Well, I would disagree. I think when used well, it can really help moderators flag things like rule-breaking content. Imagine if you have a niche community and you have a set of rules. That AI could understand those rules. And when people come into your community, maybe that AI, when you are posting something that's against the rule, for example, a dog in the cat standing up community, AI could help solve that for a mod before they have to see it. So really, I think that it's important that human verification is top priority, right? Reddit's going to thrive because it's real, it's people helping other people, and AI needs to support the moderators. There's never a world where AI should replace the moderators, because at that point, Reddit loses everything that makes it special.
That was Laura Nessler, Reddit's Global Head of Community.
And that is it for this week's edition of The Media Show. Thank you very much indeed for your company, and bye-bye.
Bye. And if you'd like to hear a longer version of today's show, search BBC The Media Show wherever you get your BBC podcasts.